Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' Weekly Meeting for July 3rd, 2024. Commissioner Plant, any preliminary comments? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I am ready to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Gilman,
Good morning. I'd also vote to approve the consent agenda.
as would I. Let's skip item 1 on the energy water discussion agenda for now and come back to that in a minute with the Black Hills rate case and jump to proceeding number 22AL-0426G, Rocky Mountain Natural Gas. Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff. Rocky Mountain Natural Gas filed a rate case in October of 2022. It sought to increase its annual revenues by approximately $12.1 million. Rocky Mountain is part of Black Hills Energy, and it's an intrastate pipeline entirely within the western slope of Colorado that by and large serves Colorado Gas, Black Hills Energy natural gas distribution utility. By decision R23-336 that was issued in May of last year, ALJL and Kahan approved a settlement agreement that proposed an annual increase in base rate revenues of about $8.1 million. UCA opposed that settlement and filed exceptions to ALJ Hahn's recommended decision. And by the Commission's decision on exceptions that was issued on July 12th of last year, the Commission denied UCA's exceptions and upheld the approval of the agreement. In reaching settlement, Rocky Mountain agreed to conduct an engineering study to assess capacity storage expansion opportunities and also separately to study the options associated with certain gas gathering assets. For example, Rocky Mountain agreed to analyze options for the future operations of its rifle processing plant, which is jointly owned with Public Service Company of Colorado. Earlier this week, Rocky Mountain filed a motion seeking additional time to file these two studies. Both are currently due on July 12th of this year. However, Rocky Mountain requests a new deadline of August 30th to file the Wolf Creek Storage Facility report and a new deadline of November 15th to file the gas gathering assets and rifle processing plant report. Because the motion is unopposed, Rocky Mountain requests the Commission waive response time. Rocky Mountain explains that it's engaged a third-party consultant to perform an analysis on the capacity and storage opportunities of Wolf Creek, and that additional time is needed for the consultant to complete that study. And Rocky Mountain further states that it's continuing to evaluate various options associated with the gathering assets, including discussions with Public Service to address long-term plans associated with additional investments at the rifles facility. I'm prepared to make a recommendation on the motion if you'd like.
That'd be great.
I think Black Hills has shown good cause for the additional time, and the motion is unopposed. So I therefore recommend the Commission grant the motion and waive response time.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision, Mr. Davis, granting the motion and waiving response time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 24AL-0264E, Black Hills offsite metering service. Mr. Fuller.
Good morning. This is Adam Fuller with the Economic Section. I also may bring in Bill Dalton if there are any other questions in the discussion. Today, I'm presenting advice letter number 870, which is the Black Hills Colorado Electric, doing business as Black Hills Energy, filing to update the fixed reasonable charge applicable to offsite net metering service effective July 5th. The fixed reasonable charge is designed to recover the company's cost of delivering the electricity generated by retail offsite distributed generation and the cost of administering the offsite net metering credits. The fixed reasonable charge is multiplied by the customer's allocation of electricity generated from the offsite net metering facility in any billing period, and the company calculates the fixed reasonable charge using a formula rate template to identify a distribution-only revenue requirement using traditional cost of service components. Black Hills may update the fixed reasonable charge once annually through an advice letter and tariff filing like this one we're talking about today. This filing increases the fixed reasonable charge from the existing rate of 2.698 cents per kWh to 2.965 cents per kWh. The company notes that no customers are participating in offsite net metering. Therefore, this update does not impact customer bills or company revenues. Black Hills filed an amended advice letter in this proceeding also to correct the sheet numbering and effective date listed in the tariff sheet. Staff reviewed the company's calculations and finds that the advice letter filed in this proceeding correctly implements the fixed reasonable charge applicable to offsite net metering services based on the conditions approved by the commission. I'll pause here for any questions, or I can proceed to a recommendation.
If you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. I recommend the commission allow the company's advice letter to take effect by operation of law.
Commissioner Plant, questions, comments, or a vote?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
Thanks, Mr. Fuller. I also agree.
as do I. So thank you, Mr. Fuller. Jumping back to proceeding number 18A-0676E, Black Hills time of day rate pilot program. Ms. Friedman, Ms. Dundas.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lindsay Dundas of your Commission Council. I'll be presenting the permanent waiver motion decision points, and then Ms. Friedman will take over. In Black Hills' last phase 2 electric rate case, which was back in 2017, Black Hills proposed a residential time of day opt-out pilot program. That program was further analyzed in this proceeding 18A-0676. In that proceeding, the Commission on Exceptions reversed the ALJ's decision and denied the pilot. But in doing so, the Commission required Black Hills to file a notice 6 months prior to the filing of the next rate case so that the time of use issues could be evaluated prior to filing. Black Hills did not make that required filing prior to filing the present rate case that will be discussed in a few minutes. It stated that its failure to do so is inadvertent, and therefore it seeks a permanent waiver of this Commission directive pursuant to Commission Rule 1003 in the 18A proceeding. In its motion for permanent waiver, Black Hills contends that the review of TOU rates and its 2 TEP filings sufficiently meets the Commission's requirement for the TOU issues to be reviewed, and that most of the parties to the 18A proceeding have had the opportunity to discuss the TOU rate components. The company also states it expects many of the same parties to that proceeding to intervene in the company's current rate case, so there'll be sufficient time to fully consider the TOU proposal within the course of the proceeding. As basis for good cause under Rule 1003, Black Hills argues that because any parties in the current proceeding may seek to participate in the forthcoming rate case, and that most of the parties already did have opportunity to participate in the TEPs, the purpose of the notice is fulfilled and stakeholders are not harmed by the lack of 6 months notice. On June 20th, Pueblo County filed an opposition to the motion, in which Pueblo contends that the advice letter cannot be certified as complete because the company did not meet the requirements of the previous rate case, and that Mr. Harrington, which is a Black Hills witness's certification, is inaccurate because the filing is incomplete. Pueblo urges the Commission to reject Black Hills' reasoning that other parties have reviewed the TOU rates in the TEP proceedings because it argues the TOU rates for EV customers is different than a full stakeholder engagement as proposed here. Pueblo objects to requiring interveners in the proceeding to use resources for discovery and experts that should have been done prior if the 6 months notice had been provided. Pueblo offers 4 options for the Commission. First, reject the advice letter filing entirely. 2, strike portions of the advice letter that deal with the new TOU rates. 3, determine that the advice letter filing is not complete and order it to comply with its obligation. Or 4, require Black Hills to comply with its order in this 18A proceeding. On June 24th, Black Hills filed a motion for leave to reply to Pueblo's opposition. In its motion for leave to reply, Black Hills argues a reply is warranted because pursuant to Rule 1400E, a reply is appropriate when a material misrepresentation of fact or incorrect statement of law is present. Company argues that Pueblo misleads the Commission by arguing that Mr. Harrington's attestation is inaccurate because it relates the new completeness rule based on Senate Bill 23291 and not to the notice issue at hand. Black Hills also argues the Commission did not make the 6-month notice requirement a condition precedent to file a new rate case, as Pueblo contends, and argues that several of Pueblo's suggested remedies would violate their due process rights and are wholly disproportionate to any alleged harm. Importantly, Black Hills reminds the commission that what is proposed here is an opt-in approach to TOU rates, which was different than the proposal in 18A. So for the first decision point is whether the commission should determine whether it will grant Black Hills' motion for leave to reply and consider Black Hills' reply when deliberating on the permanent waiver motion. So I'll pause here for a vote, or I can provide a recommendation.
Yeah, on that issue, if you could provide a recommendation, that'd be great.
Sure. I recommend granting the motion for leave to reply and considering Black Hills' reply. Black Hills points to statements by Plebo which meet the standard in Rule 1400 for a leave to reply, and further, Black Hills' reply raises important concerns about Pueblo's proposed remedies.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. So with that vote, I'll quickly summarize Black Hills' reply for your consideration. In its reply, Black Hills argues that Pueblo did not demonstrate any harm in its response in opposition to the waiver because the rates are opt-in rates only, and that the 6-month notice requirement would not have changed the outcome here because the class cost of study was not complete until recently, and that is necessary to set the specifics of the TOU rate proposal. Black Hills indicates that it would accept the commission striking the TOU issue from this rate case if the commission believes a lack of notice requires remedial action, but argues that dismissal or delay of the rate case based on the notice requirement in a different proceeding would be unlawful, and at minimum, the commission would need to provide Black Hills an opportunity to be heard within the rate case before the commission could delay or dismiss that proceeding. Black Hills cautions that if delay or dismissal of the advice letter is ordered by the commission as suggested by Pueblo, this would amount to a de facto penalty of approximately $100,000 per day based on the rate case request. So with that background, the decision before you is whether to grant Black Hills' motion for a permanent waiver. And I can pause for a vote or provide a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love utilities ignoring commission orders, especially when they're seeking a large rate increase, but would welcome your recommendation.
Thanks, Chair. Advisors recommend actually granting the motion for permanent waiver of the 6-month notice requirement required from Commission Decision C19-0590. We think that granting the motion is appropriate because Black Hills has demonstrated that the rationale behind the Commission's original decision has been satisfied by the TOU issues in the TEP proceedings, and that this occurrence could not have been foreseen by the 2018 Commission. Importantly, these are voluntary opt-in rates being proposed, and there's no harm on participants in either proceeding by having the issue fully litigated now. While waiving or modifying prior commission decisions should not be done lightly, it seems in the public interest here to allow the issue to move forward through adjudication, particularly because the parties still have ample opportunity to intervene and participate in the development of rates. We agree with Black Hills that delaying or dismissing the advice letter filing would be a disproportionate remedy to the failure to provide 6 months notice here. However, the commission could legally strike the TOU issues from the rate case if it thought doing so was appropriate on policy grounds.
Commissioner Plant, comments, thoughts, discussion, or a vote?
Yeah, I agree with the recommendation. I don't think striking it from the deliberation in the rate cases is necessarily the best solution here. So I would agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman? Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like the recommendation is the best way to move forward as things stand right now. But I generally agree with you, Chairman. I have a big problem with directives not being followed, not just specifically in this case. And it really feels as though repeatedly the commission lacks the authority or ability to continuously hold utilities accountable when they're directed to do something by the commission that they may not necessarily want to do. And then it's
well,
like,
we have the power.
what's the remedy? So it is a frustrating outcome, I think, albeit perhaps the best outcome with where things lie right now.
So I guess I also agree with my colleagues, but would request some language in the order acknowledging our frustration and disappointment with you know, the utility's decision to basically ignore a prior order. Just put the utilities on notice about this frustration. I mean, doesn't seem like here's the place to you know, appropriately respond, but there's, at least on my part, some significant frustration. So does that give you what you need, Ms. Dundas, to do an ABC order? Ms. Freed?
Yes, Chair. So that'll be an ABC order within the 18A proceeding, not the rate case, in
Correct.
which we grant the motion for permanent waiver and grant the motion for leave to reply, while indicating that there's frustration from the commission, and rightly so, about and expecting further adherence and complete adherence to commission decisions moving forward. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else on 18A 0676, Ms. Freeman? Are you ready to move to proceeding number 24AL-0275E, the Black Hills rate case?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm Ellie Friedman of the advisory staff, and also joining me this morning is Juliet Akamboy. She's also with the advisory staff. So this morning in this proceeding, the Commission has several decisions: the certification of completeness, suspension of the tariff effective date, and setting a notice and intervention period. So first, I'll provide a little background. On June 14th of this year, Black Hills Colorado Electric filed advice letter number 871, which is a phase 1 and phase 2 rate case. This is the first rate case Black Hills has filed since its phase 1 filing in 2016 and the phase 2 filing in 2017, which you were just discussing. With this filing, Black Hills requests an annual revenue increase of some $37 million above its current base rate revenue of $180 million. In his testimony supporting the base rate revenue increase, Black Hills witness Harrington explains that the company's service area has not seen the same economic growth that the rest of Colorado has enjoyed, and that even though the number of the company's residential customers has increased, use per customer has decreased, largely because of net metering. Additionally, commercial and industrial sales have remained flat since the 2016 rate case. At the same time, the company has experienced higher operating costs and has made investments in its electric system. Specifically, the company states that it has invested $371 million since the 2016 rate case, and it has plans to add an additional $99 million in 2024, nearly half of which is intended for distribution. The company is requesting a revenue requirement of $216 million using a current test year that ends December 31st, 2024, and a 13-month average rate-based valuation. Black Hills requests a weighted average cost of capital, the WACC, of just over 7.7%, calculated using a capital structure of about 53% equity and 47% long-term debt. The company requests a return on equity of 10.5%. Black Hills proposes to roll its current transmission cost adjustment and purchase capacity cost adjustment into base rates. The Clean Air, Clean Jobs adjustment, which had been used to recover costs associated with the company's LM6000 generating unit at the Pueblo Airport generation station, would also be rolled into base rates. The company provides a class cost of service study, that's the CCOSS, but notes that because of significant load shift from the commercial class to residential class, the resulting cost allocation would mean an increase to residential customers of about 26%. The company proposes a rate mitigation strategy of a uniform 20.5% across all rate classes, relieving the residential class of some $5 million in cost responsibility. Black Hills also proposes to shift the residential rate structure from an inclining block rate structure to a flat energy rate of about 15 cents per kilowatt hours and a fixed customer charge of $9.16 per month. The overall average residential monthly bill would increase by $20 or about 18% over current average monthly bills. In the same manner, Black Hills proposes changing the billing determinants for large general service and large power customers from the current tiered energy rate structure to one with a monthly charge, demand charge, and energy charge. As you discussed, the company also proposes an update of its time of use, the TOU tariffs, making these available to all rate classes as an optional service. TOU rates would be at a 2-to-1 on-peak, off-peak ratio, with on-peak hours from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays. On June 20th, the Utility Consumer Advocate, UCA, filed a protest request that the Commission require the filing of an historical test year and request for hearing. Among other issues, UCA expresses concerns regarding bill impacts, the use of a current test year, the 7.7% WAC and its components, the CCOSS, the proposed TOU rate proposal, and the allocation of costs from Black Hills Colorado Electric's parent corporations, Black Hills Corporation and Black Hills Service Company, LLC. So with that background, I'll turn for the first decision point to Ms. Akamboy to discuss the completeness of the advice letter filing.
Ms.
Thanks,
Akambo.
Ellie. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Juliet Akamboy with your advisory team. In accordance with Section 40-3-1025, the Commission must make a decision certifying the completeness of Black Hills Phase 1 and Phase 2 filing. Essentially, the Commission must decide whether the filing includes the sufficient information to compare test years presented by the utility and the prospective parties in the case to what is commonly called the historic test year. At a minimum, the filing must include a comprehensive cost and revenue requirement analysis based on actual auditable historic data. And such analysis must also be accompanied by work papers and other supporting materials. Black Hills explains in this advice letter filing that in accordance with the temporary certification rules, the company included the following. 1, a cost of service study that calculates the base rate revenue requirements using 2 test years, a 2023 historic test year ended December 31st, 2023, as well as a cost of service study for the proposed 2024 current test year, which will end December 31st, 2024. Black Hills states that it has provided detailed explanations of all adjustments made to the auditable historic data. The company's filing with the Commission, as uploaded in e-filings, include an executable copy of each cost of service study presented in the filing. The Black Hills filed associated papers, all the work papers, also in executable format, to which the executable copies of the cost of service study is linked. The company also included a rate trend report and commits to provide additional information if so ordered by the Commission. In light of the information provided, Black Hills requests that the Commission certify the filing as complete. The UCA did not address the certification of completeness in its protest. I'm happy to pause here for discussions or make a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can make your recommendation, and just to be clear, the historical test year provided by Black Hills ended December 31st, 2023, or okay,
2023, December 31st, yes.
So there's a calendar year test year. Yeah, if you could go ahead and make your recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend that the Commission certifies the Black Hills rate case filing is complete.
Commissioner Plant?
I would agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman?
I also agree.
As do I. It sounds like that historical test year filing submission satisfies the statutory and rule requirements.
It does. Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Akamboy. So as I mentioned, today the Commission will discuss the suspension of the effective date of the tariff sheets filed with Advice Letter 871 and consider a notice and intervention period. Black Hills proposes a July 15th effective date for the tariff sheets. And I have to note that in my early communication with commissioners, I indicated that 120 days from July 15th would be November 11th. But in revisiting that calculation, I found that it should be actually November 12th. So advisors recommend the tariff effective date be suspended 120 days to November 12th of 2024.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman?
I also agree.
As do I.
Thank you. And we also recommend setting the intervention period for this proceeding, having that run through August 2nd of 2024.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. So there are other issues that the commission might want to discuss, but those can be addressed when this comes back for your discussion at the conclusion of the intervention period.
Yeah, I just would make one comment, and we don't have to decide this today, but it'd be my inclination for us to hear this en banc, given that it's been 8 years since the last rate case, given the size of the proposed rate increase, and given the economic struggles of this community. So again, I don't know that we have to decide this today. We can, as Ms. Friedman suggests, we can wait until it comes back, but that would be my initial inclination. So I don't know, Commissioner Plant, anything else on that, or anything else on this rate case you want to say?
I don't have anything else to say. I agree with your assessment. I think this is a pretty sizable increase to the customers in the Pueblo area, and it deserves our scrutiny, I think.
Commissioner Gilman, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you and was thinking of approaching it in the same way. So that seems to me to be a reasonable way to move forward.
All right, so we're not going to take a vote on that now, Ms. Friedman, but just wanted to have that discussion as we continue to talk with advisors and counsel about how to orient to this case. So anything else on the rate case?
No, so can that be an ABC order on the completeness, the intervention period, and the suspension date? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. The final item, modifying our electric rules for identify and protect sites of historic and cultural significance to the tribes. Mr. Gomez, Ms. Crandall.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, good. I'll start off and then hand it over to Ms. Crandall. This notice of proposed rulemaking originated in August 2023 when the Commission received a letter from Serena K. Weatherelt, President of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Southeast Montana. The Northern Cheyenne have ancestral lands in Colorado, including the lands associated with the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. The letter from President Weatherelt expressed concern over the development of the Colorado Power Pathway transmission line, as well as development of solar and wind projects approved by the Commission and proposed to be sited in part in Southeast Colorado. President Weatherelt sought a government-to-government meeting with the Commission to discuss the Northern Cheyenne's concern with how those projects would impact the viewshed of the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site and potential cultural areas on what are the ancestral homelands of the Northern Cheyenne Nation. An agreement was also sought with the Commission to protect culturally sensitive sites and flora, as well as the viewshed of the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. Commission legal counsel contacted the Northern Cheyenne Legal Counsel, and meetings were established between tribal elders or direct descendants of survivors of the massacre and commissioners. At those individual meetings, Mr. William Walksalong, Mr. Otto Braided Hair, and Mr. Conrad Fisher provided a gripping narrative of the events that occurred at Sand Creek on November 29, 1864, when Colonel John Chivington and a contingent of federal troops attacked a peaceful encampment of Cheyenne and Arapaho tribal members, killing at least 160 women, children, and elderly. The attack was described by Captain Silas Soule and Lieutenant Joe Kramer, who both commanded about 100 troops, and ordered their men not to be involved in the carnage. Those officers described in graphic detail the atrocities that occurred at the hands of Colonel Chivington's troops. The Northern Cheyenne tribal elders requested private meetings with each of the commissioners, since they provided details of the Sand Creek Massacre that had been handed down over the generations from massacre survivors and not made public. In addition, Mr. Walksalong also provided a similar narrative, a public narrative, at a commissioner's weekly meeting. The tribe considers cultural resources to be an important part of their cultural heritage and a way to maintain a connection with relatives in the past. Because there's a continuing connection between the land and the people, the Northern Cheyenne tribe wants to ensure these sites, in particular the Sand Creek Massacre site, are shown respect. At the weekly meeting where Mr. Walksalong spoke, you found it appropriate to move forward with the rulemaking to take into consideration the concerns expressed by the Northern Cheyenne. As a result, Commission staff, Ms. Crandall and myself have developed rules and held multiple meetings with tribal representatives and their legal counsel, History Colorado, and Ms. Catherine Redhorse, Executive Director of the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, to refine those rules into an effective regulatory schematic, as will be discussed today by Ms. Crandall. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Crandall to discuss the proposed rules.
Ms. Crandall,
Thank you, commissioners. Can you hear me?
we can.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. I am Kelly Crandall of the advisory staff, and I'll talk about the mechanics of the proposed rules. I'm planning to discuss them out of order from where they are in the actual rules because I think it better conveys the concepts that Mr. Gomez laid out. And so my presentation will provide our recommendations on 5 topics, and I'll pause after each one for a vote. But the topics are proposed definitions, a new Rule 3620 on significant sites, proposed changes to the electric resource planning process, proposed changes to rules regarding certificates of public convenience and necessity, and proposed changes to rules on transmission planning. And I'll be using the acronym ERP for resource plan and CPCN for certificate of public convenience and necessity. After making these substantive recommendations, I'll turn to a quick set of procedural recommendations. So does that work for you all?
It does.
Great. Thank you. So I'll first discuss 3 definitions we propose to add to Electric Rule 3001. The first is for cultural and historic resources, which we propose defining to include cultural resources, human remains, and associated funerary objects, view sheds, and sacred objects. The purpose of having this term is to recognize that cultural resources may be identified outside the boundaries of significant sites. There are numerous state and federal definitions for cultural resources, so we don't intend to supersede those with the definition, but we do recommend the Commission see comments through its NOPR on whether the definition is clear and comprehensive. The second definition is for significant sites. This is a term of art that's created for reference throughout the proposed rules, and we propose to allow 3 possible paths for identifying a significant site. First, the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site is explicitly included. Mr. Gomez spoke about the reasons that this site is unique and significant. Second, we propose to include sites that are registered within the Cultural Resources Database of the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation within History Colorado. This database includes cultural resources sites across the state, and stakeholders have encouraged us to use an existing central source rather than creating some kind of new list through the rules. And then the third path would include other sites that are designated as significant sites within a commission proceeding. I'll discuss the process for that a little bit more as part of the next section. But we do also recommend the commission ask some clarifying questions on these paths, including what steps are involved in using the cultural resources database, whether particular information should be required for the commission to make a determination about including significant sites and so forth. The third definition we recommend adding is for tribal nations. We propose that be defined to mean federally recognized tribes. And upon discussion with the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs, we believe that explicitly referencing federally recognized tribes is sufficiently inclusive, as it's going to include tribal nations regardless of whether they are located within the state of Colorado. So I can answer questions on that first item or turn it to you all for a vote.
Commissioner Plant.
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
As do I.
So do I.
Thank you. This next item is on a proposal to create a new Electric Rule 3620 on significant sites. This is going to be the longest item I'll present today. The purpose of the rule is to establish procedures for utilities to identify and mitigate impacts to significant sites in the context of ERPs and CPCNs for new facilities or extensions, facilities, and in other proceedings set forth by the Commission. So there are 3 primary elements to this rule. Identifying impacts so that notice can be provided, filing of information in commission proceedings, and procedural rights of tribal nations. So first, we propose a paragraph A regarding site identification. In conversations with the Northern Cheyenne Tribe and History Colorado, we heard the need for ongoing collaboration with tribal nation representatives to identify sites that could be significant. We understand that this may be especially relevant for parts of Colorado where there may not have already been extensive cultural resource surveys. So accordingly, we propose rules stating that impacts to significant sites could be actual or potential, and that utilities should work diligently with tribal nations and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation to identify them. And we added this office as they're often a central point within the state of Colorado for maintaining information about cultural resources. Given that the processes required by statutes and rules position utilities as the primary entities that would understand where energy infrastructure is going to be developed in the near future, we also propose to place responsibility on them to notify impacted tribal nations and the Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation upon the filing of a relevant application, or as soon as impacts to a significant site are identified. So for example, if they're not known in phase 1 of an ERP, they might be identified in phase 2 of an ERP. The second element we propose is the information a utility should file regarding significant sites in covered applications. So an objective of this rule is to ensure that the commission has appropriate information to assess procedural equity and to understand whether there are alternatives that could be more cost effective than potentially impacting a significant site. And so we recommend the utility be required to file a description of actual or potential impacts from its proposed actions, how any negative impacts could be avoided or mitigated, an analysis of alternatives, which tribal nations are impacted, and information about communications between the utility and or third parties, which could, for example, include developers and tribal nations, as well as how ongoing discussions are going to be conducted. We also recommend the commission require utilities to describe relevant federal, state, and local requirements that could impact the proposed action, such as requirements for repatriation, just given that there is such a complex array of statutes that govern landowner responsibilities. And so while this rule would require information, we also recommend the utilities work with tribal nations to protect information about the location of the site as appropriate, because we've heard concerns about looting where sites are identified too clearly. And the third and final element we propose under this rule has to do with some unique procedural rights. In energy proceedings, only 3 entities have an intervention of right currently. This is trial staff of the commission, the utility consumer advocate, and the Colorado Energy Office. And all other entities have to seek permission to become parties. So to recognize the unique government to government relationship with tribal nations, we're proposing they be afforded intervention of right status so that they could designate a representative for participating in the proceeding, and that representative need not be an attorney. So under this process, the tribal nation would notify the commission of its intervention by right within 30 days of the utility's filing that addresses an impact to a significant site. And just to follow up on the paths that we had proposed for designating significant sites, we recommend that as part of this intervention, a tribal nation could identify other potentially significant sites in its filing, and the commission could direct additional process at that time if needed to determine confirming treatment of that site. And so with that, we propose asking some questions to participants that would go out with the NOPR, asking about existing practices that are currently used to engage with tribal nations by electric utilities, wholesale cooperatives, and independent power producers, asking whether electric utilities or wholesale cooperatives have been required by federal, state, or local laws to conduct cultural resources surveys, asking from the perspective of tribal nations what has been the experience so far of communicating with those entities, and asking to the extent, asking whether those entities have communicated with or collaborated with offices at the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs or History Colorado in the course of doing this. And so I can answer questions on that piece or turn to you all for a vote.
Commissioner Plant.
I would support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman,
I also support your recommendation, Ms. Crandall.
as do I.
Thank you, commissioners. So now I'm going to turn to how we propose this new rule 3620 would be applied in certain other situations, starting with the ERP rules, just to add some targeted clarity. And so again, I'll talk about this based on the flow of an ERP case rather than the order of the rules specifically. For the audience, an ERP includes two phases. The first phase addresses how the utility will obtain bids for generation resources, like contracts for renewable energy or fossil fuel plants. The second phase is about authorizing the utility to move forward with its particular portfolio of bids after it has developed that portfolio. So first, we recommend that Rule 3616 on requests for proposals be modified to require utilities to request from bidders information about impacts to significant sites and the historic and cultural resources thereof, as detailed in Rule 3620. Second, we recommend modifying Rule 3617C, which sets forth the contents of commission decisions on phase one of the ERP. So in phase one, the utility would collect from bidders relevant information. Then the commission's phase one decision would address the sufficiency of the process by which that information is going to be collected, which could include how it goes into model contracts or evaluation criteria. So in a case at that point, the utility would move into likely a solicitation process. So next, we recommend modifying Rule 3613H that sets forth the contents of commission decisions in phase one of an ERP. So in phase two of an ERP. So in phase two, we anticipate the utility would be to identify whether specific bids have an impact on significant sites. And so the phase two decision would address the sufficiency of the utility's treatment of those sites, whether mitigations or alternatives are viable or cost effective, and in particular, how it's considered any information received from tribal nations in making that decision. And finally, we would add a modification to Rule 3618A, which would be a requirement that when a utility files an annual report on its progress to implement the ERP, it would discuss ongoing discussion or consultation with tribal nations. And we recommend there be parallel changes to Rule 3605 for wholesale cooperatives. That rule is just structured a little bit differently than for investor-owned utilities. We also propose that you ask the following questions. Are bidders and ERPs currently required to conduct and submit cultural resources surveys? And if so, what kind of information must be provided and how is it reviewed? And then should a utility be permitted to reject a bid in an ERP if it fails to address whether there are impacts to significant sites, which is a concept that's been discussed in the course of labor requirements as well. And so I can answer questions or turn to you all for a vote.
Commissioner Plant,
I support the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman,
I also support the recommendation.
as do I.
Thank you. I will now turn to how we propose to apply Rule 3620 to Rule 3102 on CPCNs under statutes which cover construction and extension of facilities. We propose Rule 3102B be modified to require a utility seeking a CPCN include impacts to significant sites and actual or potential costs associated with avoidance or mitigation of impacts, and that the utility would file any cultural resource surveys it's already been required to conduct by federal, state, or local agencies. We also propose the decision C comments under what circumstances electric utilities, wholesale cooperatives, and independent power producers are currently required to conduct cultural resource surveys, whether the commission should require that those surveys be performed and filed with CPCN applications if they're not already done so, and then if so, what level of due diligence is appropriate, and also whether it would be desirable to consider parallel rules for gas CPCN since this only covers electric. So I can answer questions or turn it to you all for a vote.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman,
Also agree with the recommendation.
as do I.
Thank you, commissioners. So before I turn to procedural recommendations, the last substantive item we have here is proposed modifications to Rule 3627 on transmission planning. So this rule includes a section on 10-year transmission plans. And in discussing the proposed rules with tribal nations and the Office of the State Archaeologist, we really heard that early identification and communication is important to allow for time to mitigate risks to significant sites. So we proposed 2 additions to the rule. The first would require utilities to identify communications with tribal nations regarding significant sites. And the second addition would clarify that meaningful engagement should also include tribal nations that could be affected by impacts to significant sites. And I can answer questions or turn to you all for a vote.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gumman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you, commissioners. So we're through the substance of the rules. I'll turn to a quick set of procedural recommendations. Overall, we recommend you issue a notice of proposed rulemaking with the proposed rules we previously discussed. We also recommend the following steps. First, referring this proceeding to an administrative law judge or ALJ for expeditious resolution. We have had as Mr. Gomez discussed, we've particularly had conversations with the Northern Cheyenne Tribe and History Colorado to help shape this rule, and we think that positions it really well for referral. We recommend also scheduling a virtual public comment hearing for August 27th, beginning at 11 a.m. to be overseen by the ALJ. And we recommend setting dates to receive written comments in advance of the hearing based on the rules and the questions that we discussed here. Those dates would be August 9th for initial comments and August 16th for responsive comments. And just finally, we recommend you also direct staff to host an informational meeting in advance of comments being due, where we would provide some neutral educational content about the concepts in the rulemaking and talk about options for people to participate. This is something that's been piloted in a few cases where we think there may be significant, potentially significant participation. And so with that, I can turn to a vote on the procedural issues.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
Commissioner Gumman,
I also agree.
as do I. Anything else or?
I have 2 quick administrative issues to close us out. If that's all right. The first is the decision is not going to be issued this week because of state holidays, but when it does go out in the next week or 2, we'll plan to have updates ready on the website and by email. And this also wasn't part of the decision process today, but I did want to share an update as it relates to our Senate Bill 21272 implementation work, which is that Director White has been taking the lessons learned in this process and working to provide more internal staff guidance on appropriate practices for tribal consultation. So this work, part of the significance of this work is that we hope it's a foundation that we can build on as we continue to move forward with that legislation as well. So I just wanted to provide that update, and commissioners, if an ABC decision is okay, we can focus on getting that out.
Yeah, so you can do we can have an ABC decision opening a rulemaking, issuing the NOPR and proposed rules, and referring it to an ALJ as you suggest. And just want to thank you and Mr. Gomez and the team for your leadership in bringing these rules forward in a timely and thoughtful way. With that, any final comments on this or anything else, Commissioner Plant?
No, I just want to thank the staff and Mr. Gomez for working with the tribal nations and other interested parties in developing this. I think this is a really important step forward for us, and appreciate all the work.
Commissioner Gumman.
Yeah, similarly, just wanted to thank you, Ms. Crandall and Mr. Gomez for your leadership on this issue, and really across the board, the work that you've been doing, Ms. Crandall, related to Senate Bill 272. I think this is an important piece to ensure that the voices in any issue or conversation are appropriately considered so that we can understand, essentially the ramifications and options available in any of these decisions. And I think this is a really important step for tribal consultation as part of the bigger thinking there. So really appreciate your leadership and thoughtfulness in putting this proposal together, and look forward to getting some comments so we can ensure that it functions as well as possible.
All right. With that, I think that concludes our agenda. I just want to wish everybody a great holiday weekend. And with that, Commissioner Plant, anything else? Are you ready to adjourn?
Yeah, I'm ready to adjourn. I just wanted to bring up one thing, just in the interest of full disclosure. I have an old friend of maybe 25 years that I go fishing with, and I'm going on a fishing trip with him in August. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that he now works for Excel. Well, he doesn't work in regulatory stuff. He works on more legislative policy. I just wanted to bring it up just so that people know. It's just a personal, it's entirely a personal trip, and yeah, I just wanted
I'll leave that with the attorneys to appropriately document how many fish you caught and who had to skin them and everything else. Commissioner Gilman, any comments, thoughts before we adjourn?
I do here solemnly swear I don't fish. I have never fished. I don't have the patience for fishing. So that's it. But everyone enjoy the 4th of July, and hope everyone gets some time with the families to enjoy.
Likewise, thanks all. And with that, we're adjourned. I hope everyone has a great weekend.